The weather the last few days has been downright inspirational, so let's talk a little bit about hell. Now, many people love Dante, although I offer to you that his works are often misunderstood. The purpose of his Inferno was not really to take a census of hell to see who was there, but rather to put forth in prose a theology of sin. The final destination of Dante's journey in the Divine Comedy was never meant to be the lowest pit of hell. It was always the apex of heaven, the beatific vision, to see God face to face. But in order to reach heaven, Dante had to become aware of sin, including his own, and its ugly consequences, and thus enable him to be rid of all the shackles of sin and despair and move forward. In a way, sometimes Pope Francis is likewise misunderstood. In a famous off-the-cuff remark, Pope Francis was quoted as saying, "If a person is gay and seeks the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge that person?" Now, this was taken as some kind of seismic shift in Vatican thinking, even though Pope Benedict used similar language before, and it's not what people think it means. The point was missed, that we don't look to hold a person's past sins against him. We look to move forward. We want that person and all people to move beyond their past, beyond their sin. Before he uttered that famous remark, Pope Francis stated, "This is what is important, a theology of sin." Why is the theology of sin important? Because sin has consequences. We must recognize that sin is real and there is also justice. In the interview book written while he was yet a cardinal, the future Pope Francis spoke of sin, not as a theoretical construct, but really as a more palpable one. To those who would say that sin is only for quote-unquote inside the church and not something about the rest of the world at large, he said, "Hence the classical liberal conception of religion being allowed only in places of worship, and the elimination of religion outside of it is not convincing. There are actions that are consistently done in places of worship, like the adoration, praise, and worship of God, but there are others that are done outside, like the entire social dimension of religion. It starts in a community encounter with God, who is near and walks with his people, and is developed over the course of one's life, with ethical, religious, and fraternal guidelines, among others. There is something that regulates the conduct of others, justice. I believe that one who worships God has, through that experience, a mandate of justice toward his brothers." Now, in his youth, the Polish-Lithuanian Nobel laureate poet Czesław Miłosz experienced firsthand himself under atheistic communism this kind of so-called enlightenment, this freedom from religion that Marx and Lenin had promised, that some pundits in our own nation, in our own city here, seek today. But something strange happened. Atheistic communism had not delivered and could not deliver paradise on earth. As a poet wrote of this awakening, that people used to say, "Religion, opium for the people. To those suffering pain, humiliation, illness, and serfdom, it promised a reward in an afterlife." And now we are witnessing a transformation. A true opium for the people is a belief in nothingness after death. The huge solace of thinking that for our betrayals, greed, cowardice, murders, we are not going to be judged. Our Lord today teaches that great mystery of sin with everlasting consequences. Because sin is a human condition, it affects all humanity. Not even God's chosen people can presume on God's mercy simply by their covenant status with God. He is certainly more than free to save whom he wishes, and indeed delights in bringing the farthest sinner or pagan into his holy mountain. His wish the whole time forever was for Israel to be the light that drew the sinners and the lost forward into his fold, not to be the darkness that obscured the way. Now, the words of our Lord today are difficult. Our Lord is plain and clear. Some will be lost. The witness of the saints and the church fathers is constant. Some will be lost. Now, will it be many? Will it be a few? That's the question our man asks today. Our Lord does something interesting here. He answers in a roundabout way, making the whole business of hell quite personal, using the word you over and over again. There will be many who attempt to enter through their own strength, through their own merits, but they will fail, for only God can open the gates of paradise. And he threw them open first for a condemned thief, not for a self-righteous son of Israel, a Pharisee or scribe. This is where we encounter that narrow way. Notice that word, narrow. It does not seem broad, inclusive, does it? It is pointedly exclusive. It is meant to weed out those who attempt to enter through their own righteousness and not by God's. These are the ones guilty of presumption. There are those poor souls that exclude themselves because they did not bother to seek the narrow gate. These are the ones who despair of God's mercy and place themselves on their own path. Lastly, there are those who have their own idea of where the gate should be. They will call themselves the children of righteousness, but they're going to be knocking on the wrong gate. The theologian Cardinal Avery Dulles, meditating on this mystery of this population of hell, wrote that, all told, it is good that God has left us without exact information. If we knew that virtually everybody would be damned, we would be tempted to despair. If we knew that all or nearly all are saved, we might become presumptuous. If we knew that some fixed percent, say 50, would be saved, we would be caught in an unholy rivalry. We would rejoice in every sign that others were among the lost, since our own chances of election would thereby be increased. Such a competitive spirit would hardly be compatible with the gospel. So what are we to do? Perhaps in a sense we should do what our Lord tells us to do. Worry about ourselves and our sin first. As the flight attendants tell us each and every time we board that plane, in case of danger, take care of yourself first, then tend to the weaker. Well, perhaps we should ensure our own house is in order, that we are headed toward the narrow gate and not another. Then we can also worry about others. And yes, we must worry about others. Does not the Lord tell us elsewhere, take the beam out of your own eye first, then the mote out of your brother's eye? He does not say, take the beam out of your own eye and then forget about your brother. He doesn't say that. The Lord's great commission to evangelize and baptize makes little sense if it didn't matter in the end what we did for others. Let us not forget that both St. Francis and St. Dominic established their respective orders for the conversion of sinners, but especially for those who had grown lax within the church first. They serve to remind us that the goal is not simply to become a comfortable Christian in name in this life, but to truly reach heaven and help others to do so, to keep moving forward, away from sin, and always toward God. Therein lies the big difference between heaven and hell. We can imagine the welcome sign the saints to heaven first see, almost as a celestial McDonald's saying, billions and billions served. Those in heaven rejoice in each and every fellow saint in heaven. The gate is narrow, but it doesn't mean our Lord doesn't try to squeeze in everyone he can through it. On the other hand, to the damned, what does it matter who else is in hell or not? It is quite possible to be very, very lonely in a large crowd. I always imagine hell, regardless of population, as a very, very lonely place. Perhaps the welcome sign that we ought to fear to see is the one that welcomes those to the netherworld, saying perhaps nothing more than, welcome to hell, population, you. Our goal, yes, is to get to heaven. Our goal is also to help each other to get to heaven. This is not an Olympic competition. More than one soul can win the eternal prize. That is, in fact, kind of the whole point.